Welcome to another episode. I do not have a way of starting these, but Levi Allen's here. Hey, Levi.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yeah, this is nice. We just started re-chatting a little bit lately, which we saw each other in person. What was that, two years ago? No, couldn't be. Year and a half ago at Camera Camp. Got to spend
At
some
least
real
a
life
year and a couple
time
months
together there. Yeah, and yeah, I've been watching what you're doing lately, and it's great to see. If anybody doesn't know Levi, fellow Canadian, and he does adventure and van living, like much more out of studio stuff than I do, which is part of what I want to talk about today. Is like the idea of you want to be a creator, right? We all want to like do something creative. It's probably why you're listening to the show. But what the hell are you going to make a video about? Like, that's great that you want to make videos, but are you just going to record yourself sitting and talking in a studio, or are you going to go out and capture something interesting? So I want to dig into that a bit, and Levi's perfect for that because he gets out of the house a whole lot more than I do. How has the year been for you, Levi? 2020 was weird. How did it go?
Yeah, I kind of felt like last year in the trajectory of my online career or my creator career, I felt like last year was the year that was supposed to be when a lot of the pieces came together. I was someone who consumed a lot of like audience building advice when I was quite a bit earlier at this. And so I kind of formulated some sort of game plan about why investing all this time into creating videos that I was putting out for free, like what the long game model of that was. And in a lot of ways, last year was essentially kind of supposed to be a year where a lot of the pieces kind of came together, as my daughter was born last year. So things kind of got real, and it kind of felt like I wasn't supposed to keep just messing around. And that model for me was in-person education, which has some clear flaws in a year where travel is not as ideal. So there was some challenging aspects of last year for sure in that regard, in the way that I thought about what I was doing, like what was the point of everything that I was doing. But then I feel like we recovered in a sense where I still made some videos that were legitimately challenging, and then I felt that process was rewarding. So that's what I enjoy about making my own things, is doing something that's challenging. So we still managed to make the most out of a year that was not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit of that. Like I had a taste of it with that. We made some courses that were all about travel photography right before it started. I'll put links in the show notes in case anybody wants to see them. I think they turned out great. There's lots of good photography tips in there. Like they're still totally worth watching, but travel, I mean, the name doesn't make sense anymore, and we traveled a lot to shoot them. So it's like, I have a feeling and we're not selling them directly. So I actually kind of don't know the exact numbers of the sell through on it, but I'm like, I bet it's not what they hoped for. So I don't know. That was like exactly the same thing. And actually Johnny Harris was on the week before last. And at the exact same time, while I was creating, Ani and I were creating those projects, he was creating Bright Trip, which is his travel courses. So it was the exact same thing of like, going all in on teaching travel, and then there's not much of it. So yeah, it's like readjusting, recalibrating, but you still ended up traveling a bunch through Canada. The fact that you're, driving and kind of living in your own space that comes with you being a big van gives you a little bit more freedom. I think you were able to do a little more traveling than a lot of Canadians were this year. And like an awesome thing that, and we missed each other. You like came through Calgary and I didn't get to see you that day. But what's the story with van life in general? Like, just fill me in on the basics of what it really means to be living a van life, because I haven't done it.
I mean, as many different personalities there's different manifestations of what van life can look like. And I would say for us in the second half of last year, it was kind of the nomadic van travel phase. So I've got a wife and I've got a daughter, and our goal going into kind of our life has never been, hey, let's sell all our stuff and just live in a van full time. That was never really like, we never really, that wasn't the plan. But what the van offers is a nomadic way to basically do life on the road for extended periods without having it. There's more of an upfront cost than a cost each time you do it. So it's a lot easier to go hey, we're not actually doing anything next week. Do we just want to go find a lake somewhere in the backcountry, park up and live there for the week? And that's kind of what our vision was for, is unlocking more free form travel and not having travel be as much of a burden where you have to pack all your stuff every time and you've got to move your things in and out of the vehicle every time you go out for the weekend. And so for us, it looks like a couple months at a time or maybe just a weekend. And it was pretty cool to spend over half of last year in the van. Even if we weren't traveling great distances, we had planned to go down to sunny, warm places. And we stayed in Canada into the winter, which is not the most fun. But I mean, it's a lot different now than it was when I first bought the van and was just living in the van out of necessity because I just needed a place to live. Now it's definitely more of, hey, we're doing this because we want to. So it's evolved over the years from just a bare bones van to kind of a cabin on wheels now.
Yeah, I think it'd be really different depending on where you're doing it. And like doing this in the States sounds a lot more appealing than doing it in Canada, if I'm going to be honest. Like the ability to stay warm. Like I've even thought about that a little bit, is like, it would be great to go down and actually spend just be in the States for like a while, going from national park to national park kind of thing. Cause in Canada, it's just so different in the winter. Like we've had a cold snap right now. It was minus 7 Celsius, for days in a row. And it was like, you can't go outside at all. Like it was brutal. The only thing we created was the thing where you throw boiling water in the air and it turns into snow instantly. That's about all we could do. Like you can't survive
Did you get good
outside.
Results?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really cool. It's a great Instagram story on Anya's Instagram. But yeah, it turned out. So one positive thing. But at the same time, I mean, I had to shoot like an iPhone video where we're doing a bunch of camera tests. And it's like the tests of a camera indoors are very different and hard to make exciting. So I don't know. It's been a bit of a struggle. That's some of my like theme lately, is like I have been struggling to like have interesting ideas and kind of keep things new and interesting and fresh. So I don't know, maybe you can help me work through it a little.
Yeah. What's the future of what you want to do with, like, is it more important for you to make stuff? Like, what are you finding the most meaning in right now? Is it content that does like marginally well on the platform of YouTube, or is it the stuff that challenges you creatively, or is it hopefully a mix of both? Like, where do you think you're finding the most meaning?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm not finding it right now is like part of the challenge thing. I've just been, I felt like I had more of a direction of like, here's what I want to do last year, which was like, get better at commercial filmmaking, which is, something we've been doing more of it as our job. And so kind of developing a more refined cinematography look for that kind of work that then translates to client work that we do. So I kind of had this idea of a path, and we were spending more time in LA, working in LA a little bit more. Then all of a sudden we're not going to LA at all. Commercial stuff is slowing down a lot. It's like, okay, well, YouTube is great because you have complete freedom to do whatever you want. Part of the challenge lately is that it feels so circular to just talk about the gear that you make to make videos, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have run into this at various points, but that doesn't feel... you got to be in the mood for it, right? Like when you're excited about some new gear, like it can be really interesting to do. I do love to talk about cameras and the tools that we use to do all this stuff. But if it doesn't turn into something else later, it starts to feel a little like, well, where's this going? Like, how's it going to manifest itself as like a real thing in the future? So I mean, that's kind of been interesting. Live streaming is like another excuse to actually explore like what do you do with gear. So we've been doing a little bit more as we are right now of that lately. It's also, again, reminder for anybody listening to the podcast that these are now live episodes, barely edited. So if they sound different than last year, it's because they got a different energy going on. It's because we're just talking live. So next time, keep an eye out
making
for
them more efficient to make.
Watch too. Yeah. But so that's part of like the question. It's like, I don't know, how did you land on the types of films that you were making, and how would you advise other people find the if they want to be, content creators?
Yeah.
How do you figure out what kind of content you're going to make?
I mean, I definitely relate with what you're sharing about the gear interest was a massive reason that I found filmmaking so interesting as, if we call it an art form. I don't feel like an artist, but it technically is an art form. And it's why I probably resonated with that more than, let's say, painting or something like that. Like, I love tech and I love the physical nature of it, where you're building out cameras. And that's certain, like, I got into climbing when I was a kid, probably more because I liked the carabiners and the rope and the rigging. I probably liked that more than I did the actual act of climbing itself. And I would probably daydream more about the rigging. And that's why that hobby hasn't stuck around for me, because at a certain point you can only daydream about ropes and rigging. So cameras for me, like, that was kind of the starting point in the back of my high school classes, like researching on nofilmschool.com what the new secret red camera was going to be that year. And is it going to be this budget friendly new red that everyone was daydreaming could happen? And then the shocking news that it's micro four thirds with a fixed mount lens. Like, that's not what people wanted. And I just poured over this news, which I, at the time, had no business like digesting, because I couldn't afford any of the gear. And that was what stimulated like my interest. And as that evolved, I realized, oh, I could actually buy a DSLR and that would get me this kind of depth of field look. And so I went down that whole rabbit hole. And once that kind of runs dry and there's not any, I'm running out of ways to make that challenging or new, my brain started to definitely ask, okay, like, what's the point of all of this? And what am I going to do with it? Like, that's the big question, right? Like, what do we pick up cameras for in the first place?
So I almost think a good example of this, of a genre that I can't relate to, that it's weird to me the way people get into it, is cars. Because car culture, a lot of it is spending significant amounts of time reading about and looking at photos of cars you will never own or probably even drive or interact with in any way.
That's a great point.
So I know there will be listeners that are into car culture. I have a lot of friends that are, and they try to explain it to me, and it just never clicks with me. But I do get excited about gear, but only the gear that I'm going to end up using. Like, I only research the cameras I might buy and shoot with someday. I don't know everything about all the stuff I'm never going to use, because it just loses interest. That's why I don't know about Nikon cameras. I'm not going to shoot them, so I kind of don't care. But there's that whole world of people that are super into cars, and they're going to learn everything about them, spend infinite time and resources, like being extremely aware of memorizing years and models and engine details about something they're not going to interact with. And so to me, that interaction doesn't work. It doesn't make me feel fulfilled, and I just don't really want to pursue it. But obviously there are people that it just works for. Like, you can have that kind of, that your only relationship is becoming more aware of things without ever interacting with them. And I can do it for like a few hours. I can read a watch magazine about $10,000 watches I'm not going to buy, or I have a book about rare guitars that I'm also not going to buy. But that only lasts for like a day or two at a time. It's not permanent, developing my life culture around it. So I don't know. What do you think? Would you care about cars?
I could see myself caring more about them in the future, but cars definitely fit into that avenue for me, where like I'm more functionality driven in that sense, where I like the rig. I like rigs. So I like vehicles that look like people. Yeah. I like stuff where it looks like people, hey, they do something with that vehicle. And as much as I could probably find a way to relate to like supercar culture, or even just like this, whatever step below that, whatever that is. I'm not fully there, because I like the practicality of this vehicle can do this kind of, like, I always looked at, could I set up a bed in that? Like, that was my purchasing decision with like the first vehicles I was buying. Yeah. Can I set up a comfortable bed in the back of that, so that way I can camp in it to work on my own projects for cheap? So that way it doesn't cost me all this money, because no one's going to pay me to make some of these outdoor projects I want to make. Like, that was my thought process.
If I lay down in the hood of a Tesla, can I stretch out on a comforter?
No kidding. But like, that doesn't mean I'm not really excited about the future of, like, I get excited about electric car tech and driving in the first Tesla, like that experience behind the wheel of a car like that is energizing. And I joke with my wife that I would love to have the kind of wealth one day where I could just buy a cheap car and then just rally it on a track and not worry about it breaking. Like there's no consequence. But that's about the extent of my car interest goes is, does it matter to me if the car breaks, and can I afford to just like wreck cars by driving them fast? Oh, this bet is perfect. That's exactly
so Marco just pulled up a photo in the live stream, and you can, in fact, sleep inside of a Tesla. So mystery solved.
Is that a Model X? Is that what that one's called? Or is that the Y?
Yeah, I think that's I don't know. Actually, somebody else tell me. Again, I'm not the one to ask. I still haven't driven a Tesla, which it's like, as far as it goes, surprising. I've been more interested in Teslas than other cars, but still, it's like, unless I'm about to buy one, I'm not going to spend that much time on it. So I don't know. I just don't care. But like, let's bring the analogy into the real world of, I mean, I think we're mostly going to talk about filmmaking here. Do you do photography as well? Like, I don't see you talk as much about photos as you do about filmmaking.
I think there was a deliberate decision at some point where I decided I was going to care about that a little less. And I don't know if that was because, like, when I first bought, like, the first camera I bought that was a proper video camera was a T2i, which it went 5D was released, then the 7D was released, which was like the crop sensor version, and then the Canon T2i was the APS-C version of basically what the 7D, like the younger version of the 7D, because 7D was crop sensor as well. So when that came out, it's like a photo camera, and so then I started taking photos with it, and that thought process of how do I expose this image and trying to frame things nicely, like that was really helpful for me as an aspiring filmmaker. But I didn't find myself daydreaming very much about the kinds of photos I wanted to take. And this is actually a little bit of like an insecurity as a filmmaker for me, is even when I use that word filmmaker, I've so often pictured a filmmaker being someone who has ideas that they so desire to bring into the world. Like I picture, insert Hollywood director, I picture them like with a notepad at nighttime writing down ideas about which story they're going to make next. And honestly, for me, like, I'm sure the initial interest with video was, hey, these are interesting and cool tools that can do cool visual things. So it was like the cool factor. But then when I started to process those questions, I'd done dozens of test videos of depth of field and whatever, and trying to get slow motion. And once I like tested and figured out how to make an image that was somewhat nice, the question of, okay, well, what am I making with this? And what I was most interested in is what other people were doing. And so then that kind of just brought me down this pathway of, what am I interested in? Well, I love outdoor sports. I suck at outdoor sports, even though I like participating in them. So I don't want to make videos of myself doing the outdoor sports. It would be way more interesting to film other people. And when that sort of cascading, I was like, there's some really, really fascinating individuals that participate in the kinds of sports. Well, even sports, some people argue that that's not the right word, but they do extreme activities where their life is on the line. And a camera gets me access to that kind of person to then ask them questions about why do you do this? And if I was just a normal person walking up to them on a cliff and I didn't have a camera and I was just asking them all the questions about what's motivating them, they would probably tell me to go away pretty quickly, because that's just a little weird. So the access that a camera got me to real life people that were doing weird and bizarre things, that is what has kind of just been my motivator most of my career. So it's like the first half was, hey, let's research. And then the second half was, let's use all these tools to actually do stuff that's maybe adding to the conversation. I don't know if it's more, I don't know if that's the biggest driver of trying to add to the conversation, whatever that means. But the driver for me has always been, I don't really feel like I have anything to say on video necessarily that I think is adding anything. So it's always been, how do I find other people that are doing interesting things? So that's kind of my headspace. And I certainly do feel like I've ran out on that a little bit.
I wanted to have that story when I was like in high school. I was like, I want to just be the guy that shoots all my friends skateboarding. I want to make skate videos. Unfortunately, all my friends weren't very good at it. So the videos I would have made were, they were not good. It was like us barely getting off jumps and not really landing it. So you gotta have the either social circle of friends or whatever, the community near you, that you have something worthwhile to show. But like that, that's kind of like the interesting challenge of it, is finding that like, what is the motivation that you're going to tell stories about? So the, you know, part of my story, part of the things that like we do for a big part of what we do for our work has been my wife's blog, which was like so much of what got us into creating content for the internet that we get paid for. That was her blog was like our first big area of working in that. And it was kind of our full-time job for a couple of years before like we kind of expanded out to doing more of those things. And in that world, it's like, it's just so completely different where it's about fashion and lifestyle stuff where, you know, it's about, you basically take a photo of a person that looks good and the person looks cool. And that is sort of the goal. It's just like making a cool looking photo that shows off the clothes or the product. But it's so completely different if you are, say, getting into like commercial photography or commercial filmmaking, where you're working with a client that is trying to sell something that may not look great on its own. Like with clothing, the clothes are what are cool, but with you know, a vacuum, the vacuum is not the cool looking thing. You got to like tell the story that makes it become the cool thing that people are interested in. So the skill set ends up being so totally different depending on that world that you're approaching it, and the expectations of what clients would want to see or what an audience would want to see are just like radically different. If you're going to be doing a YouTube channel about filmmaking and storytelling, then you've got to have beautiful images and compelling stories, right? So it's, I mean, I don't know, like I'd be curious to like kind of come up with some general advice for like young people that are trying to find the path that they're going to go down. I mean, like there's one end is like building the technical skill set to execute whatever it is you want to do. And then the other end is learning about the thing that you're going to be a community, like the community that you want to be a part of and that you want to be capturing and telling the story of. So I don't know, how would you get started if you were 18 years old again and you were just like, you knew you wanted to create something, but you weren't sure what it was yet?
Yeah, I think it's more important than ever to, I mean, remind there's the type of person that watches other people's content and the things that they're consuming, and they go, there's that little bug in the back of their head that's going, hey, I could maybe do something like this, but my own version. And I think most of us that end up making the leap thought that at some point, otherwise we never would have bought some of the gear to start making it happen. Like it's the story.
Like, what are some things you watched early on that got you into it?
Oh, I was like watching Freddie W, who's doing like these
absolutely
these airsoft videos, but then like making them like war films. I was watching Devin Supertramp. I was watching Luke Newman from Newman Films. He was doing like early videos with the Canon T2i. Those were like my big three.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a million that I was inspired by, like some early ones for me. Like Philip Bloom was one of the first that I really got into. And that was a long time ago that he was really like doing those first major Vimeo videos and stuff. And that was camera reviews. So that's obviously like how I ended up kind of going down this path a little bit more. But like even another example of, I think a lot of people have watched Casey Neistat and said like, oh, I want to do something like that. Missing that he is daily, you know, he's capturing his life. That is effectively what he's doing. But to do that and keep it interesting, you have to live an interesting life. Like it is so critical that like the things you're doing in the day are exceptional in some way, you know, that they are more compelling than what the person watching's daily story is like. In some way, it doesn't need to be like extreme sports. It doesn't need to be dangerous or like, you know, there's plenty of people doing things from home, but you've got to find whatever that angle is that's going to make it just a little more interesting or exciting or whatever. That it's what they might be familiar with or aspire to, but with a twist. So I mean, that's just if you are interested in YouTube specifically, but obviously there's so many different paths towards this. I mean, I was just talking about that commercial filmmaking is super exciting for me. Do you care about that? Like, do you want to just work directly for clients where you don't appear in it and you're not, you know, directing the story quite as much, but you're telling their story?
Yeah, I realized pretty early on that making the jump from there's kind of the distinct stages of like the sub $2,000 video stage, and then the $2,000 to $5,000, and then the first $10,000 video. And like each one of those steps is like a pretty big, it's like a level up the ladder of video production and your skill sets expanding with it. And I remember the first project that I was on, it wasn't my project, but it was someone else's. And it was the first 6-figure like budget for a 3-day shoot that I was on. And that like 6 figures for a 3-day shoot isn't that far out there for this, for the certain realm of commercial work that gets done. And in that kind of environment, I realized, I don't know if this is like my favorite. The level of stress that exists on certain kinds of like the more sets, even on the smaller sets, it's just, I wasn't having as much fun
in that workflow.
I was technically like an AC role. So I was helping out the camera operator and the DP. Like I was helping them both. So I wasn't technically in a formalized spot, but I just realized the only version of this that I would like is if I was the one directing. Like that's the only version here that I would like. And even then I don't know if the environment of that much weighing on that style of project, like, so, okay. So what I liked about it is all these creatives working together for a singular goal. And then what I didn't like about it was how much is weighing on these 3 days going in a specific way that basically is kind of required for those style of shoots. And I kind of realized early on that actually set life in those size of projects actually isn't my goal. And then I was like, well, is the goal to get a check from a streaming service to go make a documentary series? And then I realized actually that's its own kind of stressful when the people that you're filming suddenly know you have a big budget. That makes things weird. And then you got to get location releases out the 9, and then it becomes really complicated to film. And I realized actually what I enjoy the most is just sustain my lifestyle through work. And then with the extra time that I can hopefully carve out, just go make whatever it is I want to make. And if that cycle can somehow work, then I don't have to be getting the biggest client projects or the biggest commercial work projects. And hopefully they can feed into each other if I'm doing the creator life thing on the side. But I haven't been pushing to do, like, my ideal client project is like 10 to 15 grand, 2 to 5 shoot days and 2 weeks post time. Like that is the kind of size of client project that I've been taking on these days, which is not as common. Like it's not like I'm doing tons of them, but that's like my ideal size. And I don't have this like ambition to scale that much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I think something you were talking about at the beginning of that is the idea of like wanting to, when you're on a bigger team, you'll quickly realize how little control a lot of the individuals on that team actually have, or how much decision-making power. And I think that leads a lot of people just starting out to think like, I've got it. That means I want to be a director because then I get to make the decisions. And I thought that at first. I was like, oh, okay, so I want to be a filmmaker. So that means I want to be a director, because the only filmmakers I can name are all directors because they get the most credit for the thing. There's this thing about directors. And it took a while for me to realize like, oh, wait, no, there's this other job that's called cinematographer that is pretty sweet and actually totally lines up with the things that I'm most interested in. So, when we do commercial work, we're at that smaller side of the scale where it's like the size of our crew is max, like the biggest crews we do are like 10 people. So it means that usually between my wife and I, we're sort of both like DP and directing together. Like we're just like both making these decisions and kind of just making it work. But, if it was to scale up further, and especially if it was something with, dramatic stakes with characters, I'd have a harder time, like really working with actors to develop like, okay, what is the energy of this scene that's going to match the previous scene, that's going to give continuity with your character. And I think a lot of people aren't considering those aspects of what role they want to play in a creative team when they are first getting excited about having that kind of job. It's like, I just want to have the control. I want to be able to make all the decisions. So that means I need to be at the very top, like above the line. My name needs to be on the VHS box. But like, really, that may not be the thing that like makes you feel the most satisfied. Like if you love costume design, maybe that's the thing you should be doing. If you love camera tech, there are awesome jobs on sets where you just get nerdy about cameras all day long. And like that can be your whole thing, is like you could be a DIT where you're just like, you're worried about the technical capturing factors about like, okay, make sure all of our color workflow is going to sync up in afterwards, and that you're able to, you know, capture your time code correctly across all the different cameras and audio recorders, and that you're getting the right pieces to post, or you know, like, or editing. I mean, that like editing is such a big part of storytelling too, and just realizing that you don't need to bite off all of it to enjoy the process, and possibly enjoy it way more than being at the very top of the chain. I think right now, there's this idea that's like, you're either a director or you're a YouTuber, and that there's nothing in between. I just encourage people that are interested in this to like figure out what all the other things they might be able to do could possibly be.
It is cool to be a part of the team that is executing well like that. The teamwork aspect of it is probably my favorite. And if we could just be a team that just made things that were fun and cool and didn't have the stress of the client and the producer breathing down your neck, making sure that you're hitting the deadlines, sure. I mean, the and stress, stuff like
those big jobs, like being the director, the thing that you're doing is you're just taking the stress. Like, you are the person that gets, you're going to, sure, you get the credit if it goes well. Guess what? Most movies don't go well. Most movies are poorly reviewed, don't have a huge opening, and the director just is the one that gets beat up for it. Like, it's not usually a massive success story, and there's a ton of anxiety along the way, and you're the one that's burdened with it. So I don't know. I mean, not that I'm trying to talk directors out of pursuing that. I'm just saying, don't necessarily get too focused on that. Like, this is the only thing that could possibly make you happy. That's all.
Yeah. And to circle back on when we were trying to find some sort of advice for the aspiring creator out there, I do think if you have a desire to go after it, what I wish I would have told 18-year-old me is figuring out if the creator life, I do think is mostly defined by, especially on a platform like YouTube, it is, what is your approach? And I think YouTube these days really celebrates an approach that has flavor to it, or is different, or has some aspect to it where it's quirky. Like, people love unique layers to things more so than they like the perfectly executed version that took you 6 months. They like it's why I get, out of all the camera channels that I would ever watch a video of, when I click on a potato jet video, I know he's probably going to make me laugh. And I think that's probably why his space in the camera world has worked so well for him. So like the aspiring person, I think figuring out your creative approach maybe is the wrong word, figuring out like, how do I get more of me communicated through the form of video about whatever topic it ends up being? That happening first, I think, fits the platform of YouTube well. But then following whatever your curiosity is, the more, I think these days, the more obscure combinations of ideas that you can have that then you bring to the platform of YouTube and go, hey, here's this thing I made.
The weirder it is. Yeah.
They just celebrate that. Like, I can't believe some of the stuff that I end up legitimately getting invested in these days. Like the guy Doug down in the States, who's building a massive steel sailboat in his yard, filming on his iPhone. I'm full in. Like, this guy's going Noah's Ark to the nines. He probably wouldn't like me saying that, but like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm here for. Yeah. I'm enjoying it so much. And I think figuring out,
an example of this lately has been Gerald Undone. Had, like, last time when he was here and he was doing the studio tour, and we are just sort of chatting about his channel and stuff, and we were talking about that, like, before I met him, and like, you know, we all met at the same time that I met you at Camera Camp, I didn't realize how funny he is. Like, he's super sarcastic. Like, it's a super dry comedy that I think goes over most people's heads. I think until recently, a lot of people didn't realize there was comedy on his channel because it was so dry. And I love that. Like, that's my favorite. Those are the funniest things to me, things that most people don't realize were a joke. And he's been leaning into it. And I think that's like the best. It's like, he has these really, you know, data heavy, like, this is all about the specs and about comparisons. And it's like very dense videos. But the fact that he's like inserting more and more comedy into it, I think is like going to do nothing but good things for him. I'm so there for it. I really like it. And yeah, same goes for whatever type of storytelling you want to do. If you just go for like the clean, whitewashed, like generic thing that everybody that feels like mainstream audiences are going to love, I don't know. It's probably not going to go anywhere, or you're going to have a harder time standing out.
Oh, for sure.
Which I've been doing lately. I mean, so that's like part of my thing lately too. I'm like, okay, up until recently, there was like, I had this angle that involved like, okay, we were traveling, we're doing professional production stuff on the side. So that's the angle to it. So now all of a sudden I'm in this bit of a vacuum where it's like, well, now there's that stuff is much more in studio, and it's much more, I don't know, it's much less like, I don't know, unique, because we're not like on the road doing crazy stuff. So like rediscovering okay, what actually can differentiate the stuff that I'm making from what other people are making is interesting. I mean, I don't know, this isn't a therapy session for me, but it kind of is. So.
I think the viewers at home that maybe aren't in the creative headspace themselves as regularly might be just so encouraged hearing you say that there's like questions about it. Because I could have probably guessed that there's the viewers who've just been loving every upload that you've been putting out and would be surprised to hear, oh, you're actually wanting to be more creatively stimulated right now. Like your context was just interesting to us. So I think even just like opening up about the fact of, hey, I'm trying to figure out what layers I can add, because I'm not challenged by it as much. It's not feeling like it has as many layers to it that I find rewarding. Like even just vocalizing that, I think your audience would kind of appreciate that, because sometimes we're too close to it to even see in our stale versions of our video workflow. We don't even know what's unique about the stale version. So it feels just like, hey, this is our normal, and maybe the normal gets boring after a while, but there's going to be some aspect of that where the audience knows immediately, oh, no, in your normal, this is what we still love about it. And it's hard to say what your audience aggregate would appreciate the most about what you're putting out there, but that's got to be a thing, I would assume.
Well, I got a good way of making this more general. So a great question that was posed to me today by Marco, who's editing this as we speak. He was, he's younger than I am and like just getting started. And he's like, what are the skills that you would learn if you wanted to kind of expand your filmmaking career right now? So, he's in his early 20s. He's getting good at cinematography. He enjoys color. But like, he isn't necessarily going down like the director path. What would make you, if you're just starting right now, what's going to give you the most like, kind of flexibility in terms of filmmaking career in the future, or, give you great options? And I'll give you my answer first to set it up a little. My suggestion was, you're into cinematography, great. So keep learning about lighting and cameras. Color is a big part of that. You don't necessarily have to go too deep on color to get good at it. And then I also would really recommend for the modern era, starting to, something that could set you apart is getting good at VFX and especially compositing would be a good one, or working with 3D within videos, but just any ability to do one further step of technical production that is right now a relatively rare skill, I think it would take you a really long way. So like with me, I'm into like color, lighting, lensing. And then also I kind of have to be on camera. So that has to be another interest. It's like, okay, presentation, how do I, so in like, that's like a thing I have to put attention towards, is like being a person in front of the camera. But, if you aren't trying to make a YouTube channel that is of yourself talking to camera, you can scrap all that, which is helpful. Like, that does save a bunch of time in terms of skills to learn. So yeah, that was my suggestion, redirecting it to learn more of the computer side, a little more like VFX-y. I don't know. You got any ideas?
I mean, I loved hearing a cinematographer that I've always looked up to that turned director, Ryan Booth. He said he was loading Netflix. Yeah, he would load Netflix through a Flanders monitor and turn on false color, and he would start memorizing the lighting ratios. So, I mean, I don't call myself a cinematographer at all, but with lighting ratios, with false color, you can see there's a colored gradient across the image to show which areas are at what exposures. And every style of TV show, depending on how the director of photography lit it, has different ratios going on. So, the one side, the most bright side of the person's face versus there's a overlay on the video version right now showing what false color looks like. And it kind of looks like an alien interpretation, but once you see, there's usually per monitor, there's a color scale that translates to the exposure IRE value, and there's different scales that you can use. But seeing shows through that light, literally, where you actually have it more obviously put in front of you of, hey, the key light is this exposure value, and then the fill on the side of the face is a third stop less, and then the background's like 3 stops darker than that. Kind of internalizing that per the TV shows that you like as inspiration. I think that's a good way to develop what your eye is like, and then trying to emulate that is even like taking that a step further. So once you've kind of internalized what those frames look like in false color, when you try to go recreate those, that skill set is so invaluable. But I mean, the advice of diversifying like a unique skill set of value add, I think that for me was my biggest add. Like what I can do uniquely in my career is I can show up as a one-man team with one camera to a real life scenario and walk away with a story video that's going to be good. That's like what I do. Yeah. And the way that my unique skill set to sell that to clients is that I know how to build a back end of my website that is a gorgeous proposal that has video examples. So there's an immediate wow factor, and the client trusts me more because I've done this extra work. And so that 1-2 punch of having the skill set to deliver on, and then the marketing back end to be able to offer that to a client, those two together, like I'd figure out how to creatively market what I'm doing in whatever. So if I wasn't trying to get clients to pay me to do real life adventure doc style stuff, I would apply that to whatever I was working on. Like figure out how to build a back end of a website that's customized for the person that you're trying to talk to. Because these days email is so hard to hold attention and to stand out. And especially when you can't like network in person. So man, the ability to build a back end of a website, put a password on it, email that to someone and have it be custom built out. That I used to do that with PDFs, but doing that on a website where I realized most people were opening the PDFs on their phones, and so the things wouldn't scale properly, or I'd put a spelling mistake in the PDF.
PDFs are crap. Yeah. PDFs kind of suck for that kind of like showing off material. Yeah.
But that skill set, man, I think anybody who wants to get into the visual industry, figuring out how to like show their work in a way that is most standoutable to, like, obviously once you get the visuals onto the web page, that will be really what speaks for itself. But you'd be surprised how few people, when they're reaching out to, like they think it's so simple to just reach out to someone and go, hey, like I'm willing to help you out on your set to learn from you, just let me know. But they don't take into account if they're thinking of sending that to someone, you better believe there's a dozen other people. And how in the world is that person going to remember that you exist on the day they have a shoot? It's probably not going to happen. So differentiate yourself by like actually going that extra step. And if you build that template on the back end of a website, you can just duplicate that and customize it with a URL and a password for each person. And that's free. You do that with your Netflix time, and that's going to, man, I love that tip. This is like my best tip that I have for.
You gotta write this down,
tip, man.
You should make a video. That is an awesome.
So that's my. Oh, sorry. That is the best performing. I have Squarespace as a sponsor occasionally on the channel, and the best performing video I did with them was my walkthrough of how I do that. And I love getting messages from people years later, because that video went up 2.5 years ago. I still get messages to this day of, hey, by the way, I just booked my first X amount client project using the proposal page. And you don't have to use Squarespace, of course. Like I think Adobe Spark has a version. You can do it on WordPress. You can do it on any website builder, Wix probably too. But
you can do it with whoever wants to sponsor this podcast, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's an awesome tip. And to like follow through with something that I've said a million times on this show is like the the whole full stack creator concept that I like to push down people's throats of like, the more things you can do in terms of creative skills, the more employable you will be. So even something I left out when I was saying a minute ago is audio as well. If you can show up and really make your audio sound great, like that is also huge, because budgets, a lot of smaller mid-sized budgets are cutting out audio producers, which sucks. I mean, I don't like that. I want to keep audio specialists employed, but it's also just the reality of where the industry is going. So having that, your ability to just show up as yourself and walk away with something that is solid, is like that. So many people should be aspiring to that. There are so many jobs that you will be able to do if you can do it all yourself, that if you only specialize in one niche, you're going to have a much harder time getting as many jobs. And yeah, like having that sort of that understanding of website production as well is such a big part of it, which you don't need anything technical anymore. I mean, like you say, it means just signing up and using Levi's offer code. And then all of a sudden you can start, like literally ending up getting more jobs. Same thing in terms of design. If like, I don't know, it's also, there's this balance of like, when do you hire somebody versus picking up the skill? So design is a good one. If you are pitching a lot of clients and your designs kind of suck, it can get in the way. So on one hand, it's like, I think it's great to pick up that skill, but if you don't have it yet, you don't want to be like losing jobs because you're not a great designer yet. So I guess, I don't know. Do you have like a way you sort of navigate those things that you don't quite have the skill set yet, but you realize the importance in terms of getting the job done? Like, do you end up hiring people and outsourcing it? Do you just fight through it and watch some tutorials?
Yeah, it's it kind of goes with it's like the ladder climbing process of wanting to get the projects that are higher value than you've done in the past, but not necessarily always having the work to show that you could do it. And so in the kind of like growing stage of my production company, when I was trying to get like clients to pay me more for finished videos, I realized pretty quickly that I can't sell them on a product that I haven't been able to show them that I can make. And I can't show them that I can make it because I haven't actually made it yet. And I haven't made it yet because I haven't gotten paid from the last one. So I haven't bought that new set of lights. So my lighting sucks. So you kind of get in this backwards loop where unless you have someone out there who's written you a $10,000 check to start off your business, and if you got to start from scratch, you're kind of stuck where you have to work a part-time job to save up enough money to get the first gear pieces. And then so you've got the bare bones, but that's not enough to offer the production value that you aspire to. So I talk about the ladder technique, where it's like, if you're at that $1,000 rung or below, when you get that project, because you should be able to convince someone, if you can put a video together, you should be able to convince, whatever cousin that you're filming the wedding of, that you can do it for about $1,000. Like, you shouldn't really be doing a finished video for less than that these days because of the quantity of time it takes. But if you can do that $1,000 video, I would say put everything you can into that to maximize production value, so that way it looks like they paid $2,500 for it. So then the next time around, when you can show someone, hey, I can do videos that look like $2,500 worth. If you can sell them on that, because that's what you can show you can do, if they pay you to do a $2,500 video, what I was doing at that time was taking all the money from the $2,500 video, putting it back into the production value. So that way and sometimes this was as simple as just buying another microphone. And sometimes it was, hey, actually let's hire on a role like a set designer. So it's not always like linear outputs, but do what you can. Don't just treat a $2,500 video like a $2,500 video that's just like, oh, this is just a throwaway video. Actually try to do it as if they paid you $5,000. And then when you did the $2,500 video as if they paid you $5,000, then now you've got an example that looks as if they paid $5,000 for it. And so you can't, like, those clients, usually you have to fire them after you work with them once, unless they're willing to grow with you. Because if you're giving them a $5,000 product for a $2,500 price tag, like, you can't keep doing that.
They'll never.
So you have to either keep. No. So that's like the ladder technique. And I did that across 10 videos where every single one of them, I deliberately used money from the project, didn't really pay myself, but invested it into the gear or whatever I was missing out on at that time. And that brought me from, I think, a $500 video up to my first $10,000 project across 10 videos, and every time just like ratcheting it, like slowly doing that ratchet. And I think that headspace of, hey, this might not be the most ideal project that I could possibly work on, but what about it? What could I do here that I could leverage forward that still reaches the goals that I'm getting paid for, but then I can use to leverage in my portfolio to kind of take me to that next step in my career.
What's your take on free work, especially for somebody just getting started? I've been listening to Clubhouse conversations lately, and people have a lot of takes, but what's yours?
I'm all about free on your own terms. So I think it's much better to find the people you want to work for free than waiting for them to come to you. It's pretty classic to get like in the early stages, it's pretty classic for someone to offer like, hey, can you come do this thing? We don't have a lot of money. I would say usually those are not good ideas. But what I love is, hey, if there's a company that you really respect, find a way that you could pitch them to do a project for them and come under your process. Because so much of what client work actually comes down to being is just having a good process. So it's not as simple as, hey, I can make a pretty visual thing. That should mean I make money. What it actually comes down to is businesses invest in things that solve problems that make them money. So in order to do that well, you actually need to have a process to discover this business that I'm working with. How do I make them money with the medium of video? Because if you can transition the conversation into value created for the company, that language makes it a lot easier for them to look at you as an investment and less of a cost. Because a cost you try to lower and bring down, it's like an expense. You're trying to lower your expenses. But an investment, if they put the proper allocation of resources into it, their return on that could be so much higher. So I think if there's a company, if you're willing to do free work because you don't have good examples, find a company that you're willing to do it for on your own terms, and make sure when you do it on your own terms, you treat it like a paid project. So actually have a conversation with them about what are your goals and what are the problems you're facing as a business that you think we could solve with video, and then pitch back to them what you think as the visual creation professional, what your solution to that might be. And then in that conversation, sell them on the value created. Go, hey, if we do this well, this will make you a lot of value in return. Do you agree? And then try to guesstimate based off the value that you can create for the business. Usually they should know, hey, these are our problem areas. Like they're the expert of their own business. So just ask them for their expertise and then communicate back to them, hey, if we're going to make $50,000 of sales-ish from solving this specific question that your customers ask that we could do in this video, it's reasonable to invest $5,000 to $10,000 in this video. So, hey, I'm doing this for free, but actually like make a proposal and put that number on there and cross it out, because what you'll find is they will value the finished product so much more if they know what it is that you actually made for them. And unfortunately, the amount that they invest in it will treat how much they respect the final product. Because if they think it's just a free thing, they might not try to leverage it as much. So that taking 100%. Ownership of it and actually treating it like a paid client project and actually making a proposal and actually having that gut, like that gut dropping feeling of putting a number on the proposal and then crossing it out, do that and then say, hey, if this goes well, like I would love to do this again and actually get paid this amount, but please don't tell anybody that you didn't pay me for it needs make a contract, don't tell them that this was free. And hey, if this goes well and you liked working with me, can I get a written testimonial from you? And going about it in that way, I've had companies so blown away that I took it that seriously that I was doing a project pro bono for them, that I did end up getting paid work from them 2 years later. So it wasn't instantaneous, but the benefits was I had a finished project that I like. And then 2 years later, they were so blown away by my process that they actually brought me back. And that kind of seriousness, you shouldn't be doing tons of free projects. I think in your early days, if you're doing like the three to five at most, if you treat them with that level of intensity, I think the fruit that you'll get out of that is so much more than just some random going, hey, I've got this music video, can you come shoot it for free?
Yeah, man. No, that's like, I'm totally on board with everything you're saying. Like, I think there's a lot of confusion around like what is the appropriate thing to do when you're working in this free space. I mean, the question I had heard asked the other day, again, I was just listening to eavesdropping on Clubhouse conversations, and somebody was like, well, I don't really have much of a portfolio yet. So should I be approaching companies like Adidas was their example, and offering my services for free? And I was just like, I was just listening, but I was banging my head against the wall. Like, no, please don't do that. Like, how much would Adidas value a free video that you sent them? If you want to do that kind of work, there's a space for that. And it's called like doing spec work, which is like a great way to practice. And I think can be really valuable. It's like you just call up a bunch of friends, you get them to work for free because once nobody's getting paid, everybody's more willing to volunteer their time and just try to make the most epic, amazing thing that you can. And maybe it's framed around the idea that it's an Adidas commercial or it's an Apple commercial or something. Like you pick a theme and it's about that thing to show that you could do it. But the idea of just like cold calling and saying like, hey, can I do this for you for free? It's like, just do it for yourself for free. If it's for free, if you need the resources, then then it can be helpful. Yeah. Basically try to find somebody that will cover the costs of resources, like you were saying, where you can reinvest it into the either future projects or into that project. So you could make something that you couldn't have made out of your own pocket. But if there isn't that benefit for you, like if you're not getting something out of it, just make your own thing. Because why not?
Yeah.
I think it's really not great when people spend a lot of time doing free work for companies that they don't really have a connection to even. And again, a bit of an exception I would say is like, I think you can do it in a way that can make sense for friends. Like we do favors for friends where it's like, we know like that our usual rates wouldn't really work for you based on like, you're just trying to shoot a quick LinkedIn portrait. You're a great person. We'll just shoot it for you. We're not going to like charge you a studio fee and like an hourly rate and all this just for one shot that you need.
Right.
Cause like we're close, whatever. But kind of understanding that difference and I don't love doing that kind of work at like a really steep discount. It's almost like it's either free or it's our rate. That's often how we deal with it.
Yeah. That's so key. Like the discounted rates is just a really sticky situation that I haven't had many situations, because then it doesn't get appreciated for what it actually is. And then you might find yourself in this place where they're treating you like they're paying you. Like you try to do this favor for a friend, and if you're doing it at this massively discounted rate, suddenly they start treating you like they're like it. I haven't had an experience where a discounted rate goes well.
Totally. No. And it just changes the structure of the relationships. Once there's money involved, it's a different interaction. Like if you invite your neighbor over for dinner, which I guess we're not doing right now. If you invite them over for dinner, you give them free dinner and you just like, you serve it to them. There's no expectation. Like this is a friendly gesture. This is within a relationship structure that we're used to being. There's no costs involved here. You pour them a drink that, if you were to order this vodka tonic at the bar, you'd be paying $10, but you're in my home and I'm going to keep a tab. Like you don't keep tabs of it. You just, they're in your home and you treat them like a guest. If all of a sudden you're charging for it and you become a restaurant, you're like, well, you're a friend, so you can come over for dinner and I'll only charge you $7. Now it's like they're going to start rating this service that like, oh, well, you were a little slow getting my cocktail. And like, it's either should be a friendship-based relationship where that expectation is what is operating, is like, we know what free means or we know what paying means. So if they're paying you, they've got to be paying you enough that like you can meet their expectations without feeling like you're not being compensated. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's a complicated thing, but I definitely think it can be tempting to make some wrong decisions early on that, end up with both parties being frustrated.
Oh yeah. And I think it's so key to refine what your process is. Like such a freeing thing for me in the start of my freelance career, because the reality is so much of what we're doing, even as small production teams, fits better into the language of general freelancing than the production hierarchy of larger studio-based whatevers and agencies. A helpful thing for me was just realizing if I want to get paid like a professional, I have to behave like one. And the way that professionals behave is they have it's that simple. Just behave like one. It's like having a process and then taking ownership that when you're getting paid for a project, like the things that go bad, there's almost always something you could have done to have mitigated or made that problem not be as big as it is or make it non-existent. So I was around so many graphic designers at the time. And I think in the like early 2010s, there was so much of this vibe of like, man, the client doesn't know, the client's wrong, they're so annoying.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of that attitude going on with the graphic designers I knew. And I accidentally took on a little bit of that headspace in my first like client projects that I did. And it was just exhausting because I could find so many things that I did not like about the client or why they were wrong. And then I kind of flipped that on its head off the advice of my friend Sean. And he was saying, you know what, just take ownership of every step. And if there's anything that you didn't like, take a note about that and just implement it next time. So his whole thing was like, there's no clients from hell. There's only freelancers who take on clients from hell. So it's like, or maybe I flipped that phrase. Yeah. I said, essentially the principle is like most of the projects that you're working on, if you are actually taking ownership of how it's going, there's a lot of things you can do to just make sure that it goes smoothly and you're following a process. Like I just get so fed up when people complain about the revisions process. And I go, okay, so at what point in your process when you're pitching to them did you communicate what your revision process is? And they go, oh, no, we don't do that. And we just send it over on Frame.io and then we get back 30 timestamp all alterations they want. I'm like, well, of course, you give them a timestampable tool with no restraints. And of course, like you send an email, hey, here's the first draft. What do you think? And if that's your email to them, of course they're going to go, well, what do I think? What did they do wrong here?
Can you get specific on what you would do for that feedback loop? Like, how do you deal with that? Like, here's the first draft. What do you think? How do you frame that to get more useful feedback?
Yeah, if I'm ever sending an email with a link to the video that I finished as my first draft that says, hey, here's the video. What do you think? Like, I'll delete that immediately because it's not the right way to go about it. Like, picture, I got my wisdom teeth pulled out in my early 20s. And if I was waking up from that surgery because I was knocked out and the doctor's like tapping me on the forehead going, hey, so we pulled the teeth out. Like, how did we do? Did we do a good job? Like, did we mess anything up? Did we miss anything? Like, that would just freak me out, right? Because in that context, they're the medical professional. So for me, if I'm sending my video to a client and I want to be treated like I'm a professional, I better behave like one. So the two things that I mitigate this with is right out of the gate when I'm like in the contract signing phase and we're going over final numbers, I just make sure that they understand that this is what our revision process looks like. And I'm pretty clear in the real world documentary getting turned into promo video world, there's a lot of subjective decisions that get made. And so I make it clear to them out of the gate, the first draft that I'm sending you, I'm intending to be the best version I think we could make as kind of like our starting point. So I'm not sending you a version that I just half put together and I'm intending to workshop a bunch. I have spent weeks making sure that this is what the best thing we can do with the footage we got on the day. So that's what I'm saying we're going to set out to do in the contract signing phase. So then I'm telling them, hey, when we go and do revisions, what we're looking for is there any red flags here? Like, is there titles that are spelt wrong? Is there for some reason why this music just really isn't working for you and you just can't stomach it? Is there brand points that we somehow like messed up? Like, I'm looking for red flags. I'm not necessarily looking for like subjective opinions of, hey, maybe we put these shots here or those. Like, that's what they're hiring me for. And if they don't want me to do it, then hire someone else kind of thing. And I'm not trying to be stuck up, but it like, depending on the client, they might not know why you did things a certain way. And it's like, it can be kind of a touchy dynamic there at the end. So if that's communicated up front, when we then get to the stage where the first draft is sent over, in that email, instead of saying, hey, here's the video, what do you think? What I say is, oftentimes there is things that didn't go well, and that's pretty obvious. So what I'll do is I'll go, hey, here are the areas where this video meets the goals that we set out to do at the start of this project. We set out with these intentions. This was the problems we're trying to solve. And I structured the video in this way to accomplish that. And I used this interview voice more than this interview because I thought it fit the brand messaging more and it helped me craft the story better. And I walked them through why we ended up with what we ended up. And then oftentimes there's a little section at the bottom of going, hey, I really wish that we had more shots of the headquarters here. We don't have them. A way around this is we could add an additional shoot day and go back and do this, but we don't have to do that additional route. I think it's really strong as it is. I'd love to hear from you and your team if you're feeling the same way. That's like that kind of email sent 9 times out of 10 gets me a way more positive interaction experience, even if there is some things where they go, oh, hey, can we fiddle with this or that? And how you deal with revision rates or the mechanics of how you do that revision process, I think is fine. But I personally don't send videos on a review platform with time-stampable stuff for most of my clients. There are certain clients that specific style of project, it's more linear and it makes way more sense to have time-stampable revision tools. But in the subjective world of like documentary storytelling, I do not give them those tools because I do not want some marketing person at some agency to go, oh, hey, I need to do my job, which is give the artist feedback. That is like the worst case scenario. But those are kind of the 2 things that I do to mitigate that.
Yeah, no, I think that's all great. And I end up doing some similar things. Like we basically will include, usually we'll say there's basically 2 rounds of revisions in our base rate. And then the only, if we're ever giving a discount on a rate where they're getting something pretty favorable, part of it is built in. It's like either no revisions or only 1 round of, and we like qualified of like simple revisions. And that's kind of at our discretion. But like that, it can become the biggest time sink. Like the thing that makes you regret a project is how long you're spending on revisions. Because sometimes it's not even that each change in the edit takes that long. It's that you have to pull the hard drive out of the drawer and plug it in and open up the project and relink the files. Like it's just the getting back into the vibe of like, wait, what was the last version of like final 2.0.3 that, was the one I sent to them last time. Like just finding your place can be half the time, especially if this is over several months. So it's even still a lesson that we should learn ourselves of putting even more constraints or clarity of communication, like you're saying, of making sure that the client understands this. And also, like you're saying, like so many creative professionals don't understand how much they're in the service industry, that like, just put yourself in the position of hiring a creative. Like you want to feel taken care of. It's such a human hiring experience. You're not buying an iPad here. They don't get to walk home with a physical product. What they get at the end is a very soft and squishy thing. It's like a video or a photo that is subjectively good or bad. Like they'll look at it and they're probably watching it like, at first they're blown away or they're like, is this good? Is this not good? I don't really know because I don't hire people to do videos all day long. And so you've got to make them feel good about that experience. It's the same as if somebody's going in and buying a suit or a tuxedo, better yet. They never do this. They're not used to being measured and having like dressing up like this. Like they feel uncomfortable. They're like, I don't know when I look good in a tux because I've never worn one. Last time I wore one was my bar mitzvah, and I don't know how to do this as an adult. And if the tailor or the salesperson doesn't know how to put them at ease and make them feel confident about that tuxedo they're about to walk out in public in, they're going to feel like an ass. Like you want them to leave feeling cool. Like they're James Bond now. Same with their video. You want them to feel like they're a Hollywood producer now. They just hired some hotshot director, cinematographer, all-in-one creator that made them look super cool, and they should feel good about it. And if they walk away feeling like you didn't listen to them, didn't respond to their emails promptly, didn't, especially up front before it was shot, didn't try to understand what they're really trying to do. It'll be a bad experience for them, and it's not all their fault if they're complaining. So I don't know. I feel like often creators can pass responsibility for a bad client experience more than they necessarily should. There's also still bad clients out there, but
yeah. Oh, and I have certainly had client experiences that are, it's just the most bizarre thing in the world. And I'm just like, get me out of here. But the headspace of, if things are going bad, instead of blaming, asking myself, what could I have done differently in this situation? That might just sound like so trivial and so self-helpy, but that headspace has made my freelance experience so much more positive, where now, like, I used to do everything alone, but now that I work more with contractors and teammates, like, I catch myself with them, and I try to like foster that attitude where we're never trying to beg on the client, because I mean, it's so much more rewarding to ask yourself, how could I have like flipped this around? And we just forget that when someone's spending company money, like the poor person in the marketing department is spending company money to hire you, we forget that they are trying not to get fired, you know?
Oh, and yeah, it's for sure.
It's risky every time they're making a bet on this artist. And especially in that pitching proposal stage, I think going in with that headspace of, this is another human that doesn't want to lose their job by spending money on the wrong person. Like that, like, again, I love that shift to more of a service-based thing of like, you're not trying to coddle them or be manipulative, but you really want to like make it clear that there is a pathway we could go down to get to an achievable result. And I'm your person to do it. Like that kind of confidence, and then taking them through that process and giving them the tools to talk to their boss about why the thing they made was worth the money they spent on it. That like, if I do that part well, that all but guarantees repeat work from them. Like if I can nail the execution of give this person the tools to talk to their boss well, that's like almost guaranteeing repeat work, which is like, I mean, if you enjoyed the type of client it was, like, why not get repeat work, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's also this, like, if you are going to do a bad job, like if you're going to slack off and not try at a job, the time to do that is before you take the client. Like say no to that client. If you're not going to, if you're going to like, don't take their money and then not do it, or take their money, do a great job and never work with them again. And tell all your friends, that was an impossible client to work with. Be careful if you're going to work with them. Those two things are okay to do, but once you're in it and you're going to send them the invoice, they are going to pay you. Do your absolute best to do a good job of it. You gotta, and there's just too many people I see that feel like they're in the middle of a job, and as the person being paid in this relationship, they're owed something from the client, like that their creativity needs to be able to flourish and it's not working in the right way. It's like, if you're hiring we're doing renovation right now, so it's a little bit on my mind. Like you're hiring contractors, It's the exact same thing. It's like, once you're committed to them, we've hired great contractors and not so great contractors. And it's like when they're in the middle of it and like, okay, they don't want to work with us again. We don't want to work with them again. They got to finish the job, and they can't just like start slacking off halfway through, because they're not going to get a disc. I'm not going to pay them a lower rate because they did 80% of the job. Like they're still going to get paid everything, and they've got to finish the job that they'd committed to. We can never work together again. That can be fine, but still got to finish it. So I don't know. I think just because we have the word creative in the word creator doesn't mean you get to be a diva artist. And maybe that's just me. That's my advice for the day.
Being that I'm curious what the like worst manifestation of my artist must win version of me is. Like I would love to picture a world where I'm stamping my foot going, no, we have to do it this, like that version of me just seems so cringy, and I hope I don't accidentally end up there someday if my head gets too big. That would be devastating. Oh geez.
I have a feeling you're doing good. Just based on what I know about you, Levi, you're probably doing great. if people want to see more of your work, where should they find you?
Levi Allen, search that up on the intertubes and you'll probably find my YouTube channel. And if you click to the homepage, it's got a pinned, my main documentary piece, that's kind of the flagship thing I've made, is pinned right there for you to view.
It's worth the watch. Cool. Thanks, Levi.